All right, we're at 3 o'clock and we're ready for our next speaker. We have Bill Lauto, who is coinciding historical, environmental, climate, geological, and celestial data with the gospel writings. Boy, you have your work cut out for you. All right. Bill Lauto is a certified Shroud Studies expert with credentials from the Pontifical Aninthium Regina Apostolum and Othana. I'm sorry, those are way too many strange words to me. He has studied Jesus' shroud since at the age of 14 and is an assistant to the director of Othana Sage Group. His research explores historical and environmental factors aligning with gospel accounts. As an environmental and energy scientist, he runs GoingTrueGreen.com and holds degrees from St. John University, NYIT, and SUNY. He has lectured internationally, including in Rome. Through bbjpublishing.com, he has authorized He's authored Upper Room, The Way, 33 AD to 757 AD, and donating all net proceeds to charity. He is the holder of, how many patents did you tell me?
3.
3 patents. Let's give Bill Lauto a wonderful hand.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. I think we're good with the sound. All right, I am truly honored and extremely grateful to be here today. I have to say thank you to the Augustine Institute, everyone at SEEK, and Joe Marino, SAGE, which stands for America's Shroud Apostolate Group English. And I'm also thankful to all my Shroud colleagues who are also my friends. Thank you to Athonia, Fathers Pasquale, and Dalton. And thank you to my beautiful wife of 43 years. So, and after 3 changes in my schedule and my time slot to be here on Friday at 3 o'clock, the Lord's hour, I have to say thank you in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, so now my task is to take my thesis and make it meaningful and enjoyable within 40 minutes. Okay, so information about our climate, our environment, that relates to the scientific conference that's going on here and the subject matter. So here we go. Let's see if I can relate to this. All right. All right, with modern technology, we have an advantage to see more details about our planet than ever before, especially compared to 150 years ago. Reason and faith are working in tandem and opening a third eye for us to see the complete picture. And to get the truth, we need the complete picture. On June 16th, 2010, Pope Benedict spoke at St. Peter's Square about faith and reason. He pointed out that with faith and reason, one doesn't negate the other. And he stated further that Thomas Aquinas wanted us to appreciate the reciprocal relationship between the two. Therefore, to obtain a complete picture of what Earth's climate was in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, and to have a scientific presentation about our environment in that time frame of Jesus, as scientists, we all know I have to tap into multiple scientific disciplines. Various scientific journals are a good start. And some of them are pictured here. And it gives us a starting point to understanding our environment from 2,000 years ago. The main objective is to provide additional supporting evidence connecting the events that occurred on the day Jesus was crucified, connecting that to information about the Shroud of Turin, the Sudarium, and also give additional supporting evidence and credibility to the Gospels. So, as you said with the introduction, I guess, yeah, my work is cut out for me, but it's a good start. All right, so a little bit about myself, just to break the ice and to get me rolling. My Shroud studies and my involvement with the Shroud started in earnest when I was invited as an environmental scientist. I was honored to receive this invitation to speak at the Pontifical University of Science and Faith in Rome by Father Pasquale. And there I spoke on sustainability, our environment, and Pope Francis's encyclical letter, Laudato Si, which was on the environment. So he basically looked into my work, saw my website, asked me to send in an outline, and after about 6 months of evaluating me, I received that invitation. So I definitely was honored to do so. Going True Green has a search box at the top. Just side note, feel free to use it anytime to plug in any topic you want, from air conditioners to hydrogen fuel cells, from solar panels to plastic pollution. Okay, I have decades of blogs up with free information. So because of that background, I went to speak to the seminarians in the master's program at the university. And as you can see in the picture here, answering questions. They wouldn't go home. I ordered a room. It was over. I answered the questions, and they're still coming up afterwards. I was on the plane. I was supposed to speak the day after I arrived, but the schedule changed. So I'm awake for 33 hours. I love the number, 33. But the thing is, I needed a double shot of espresso from the cafe. Otherwise, I was ready to fall down. So Father Pasquale's not here. See, he knows this story, so he ran out. It's like, okay. All right, but however, that's not where it started for me. My beginning with the Shroud of Turin started when I was 14 years old. I lived in Brooklyn. I was in Catholic school. We moved out to Long Island, and now I found myself in public school. And my friends were of different faiths. Some were atheists, agnostic, and I was going into the science field. So I started to question my faith. And I did so by just looking up all the different religions and philosophies in the world. And I started to read. There was no Google back then, so I had to actually read a book. Right? And I noticed my mother was getting agitated. You know, in Italian, she would say, "You're giving me agita." Okay? So she was afraid I was going to change my religion, but I wasn't going to have a religion. I wasn't going to be believing in God because my science teachers were saying scientists don't believe in God. So the last thing I did was look up Jesus Christ in the Encyclopedia Britannica. And I came to the last page of that section. There was a painting, a picture, as you could see. Oh, wrong one, sorry. As you could see here. And then when I finally came to the first page, after seeing all the different artwork created by humankind, I saw this black and white photo. Immediately, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I became acutely aware of how insignificant and how minuscule I was sitting in my bedroom compared to the universe. And I said to myself, how am I looking at a photograph of Jesus Christ? And that's all I had from the Encyclopedia Britannica. Image from the Shroud of Turin. And again, no Google, no books in the library on it. There was no STURP team. This was before, and now this has been corrected. I corrected my notes because Dr. Jackson told me he was not the one that put the photo of Jesus into the VP8 analyzer. It was Bill Murden, and he put it in and saw the three-dimensional data come out and told Dr. Jackson, and there started the cascade through the scientists at the lab. So that didn't even happen yet. I had to wait several years before articles started to be published about this STURP team going to Italy. So, but I survived, and I would never believe I was standing here today, but this is it. But there I was about almost 10 years ago now, standing with Father Pasquale, because with lecturing there on sustainability, I said, you have to give me a tour of the Shroud Center in the university, because I've been carrying a picture of Jesus in my wallet from the Encyclopedia Britannica since I was 14. So he's given me the tour, and since then I've volunteered and researched in both Faith and Reason ministries and jobs. After completing the graduate Shroud certification program, that was another thing. I go there to teach, and then I find myself a student again. And Father Dalton was one of my professors, and he was ready to hit me over the head with a hyssop branch, but that's another story. So, anyway, so I now find myself the Northeast regional leader for SAGE on the Norakeech. And I never expected any of this. So after getting my certification in Shroud Studies, I realized that a historical novel I wrote in 2010 needed a second edition from everything that I learned during that certification program. So my second edition book is available as of last year, and I wrote under a pseudonym. It's not about me, it's about Jesus. So I don't need my name on it. And all proceeds, 100%, go to charitable causes. And if anyone wants a copy that's left, I'll be happy to autograph it. So here in the photo, I'm getting the tour. And I really don't want to keep this photo on much longer, because you could see I still had hair back then. So let's get to it. Okay, elements of my thesis. All right, with today's change in our climate, such as receding waters at the Dead Sea and melting glaciers in Norway and Greenland, science have acquired additional data that propels us to more realistic estimates about the date Jesus was crucified, contributing factors to what blocked out the sun on said date. Was there a lunar eclipse as the prophecies claimed? And what was the approximate ground temperature in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago? My discourse presents a collaboration between a conglomerate of scientific disciplines, such as, you ready? Here we go. Historical weather conditions, celestial events, geological formations, Roman political time frames, the Jewish calendar, civil time telling, the earthquake parameters, data derived from archaeologists studying new exposed layers of the Dead Sea, and dust storms of seismic and weather-related origin. Okay. Collecting the data shows parallels to pre-recorded prophecy and documented conditions by the apostles in the Gospels, and also secular historians. And then I started seeing connections to the Sudarium, and said, okay, what's the first thing we need? We need criteria to be met. And the first one was, we need to get the date Jesus was crucified. So we have to match up all the criteria to see if we could get into the right time frame. So by the 1980s, scientists had already determined that only 2 years came close to to matching all the criteria for when Jesus was crucified. That was 30 and 33 AD. However, neither of them had the major elements necessary. Both years had Pontius Pilate as the ruler of Judea, and they had the Jewish holidays all happening on that same weekend, but all the other criteria was missing. Right? By the late 1880s, scientists had calculated manually backwards to 30 and 33 AD, all the celestial movements of the sun, the moon, and the earth. And they looked at their calculations for what was visible over Jerusalem. Now, we all know that two eclipses, lunar and solar, cannot happen on the same day. So, if a solar eclipse blocked out the sun in the afternoon, and there was also a lunar eclipse for the prophecy that said there would be a blood red moon coming up over the horizon, then that's discrediting all that information in the Gospels. We can't have both of them on the same day. So we have to figure out what happened or what can answer for what didn't happen. All right, suffice to say, 33 AD meets the criteria of Pontius Pilate sitting as the ruler over Judea, and all the necessary Jewish holidays fall into place on the same weekend, thus presenting the date of April 3rd, 33 AD. But now we need a lunar eclipse, an AKA blood red moon. It has to be on the same day and year. Second criteria, dating the crucifixion. All right, we got problems. In 1872, J.R. Hine published a paper in the British scientific journal Nature, in which he noted that the moon was eclipsed on the general receiving date of the crucifixion, AD 33, April 3rd. Unfortunately, it was a partial eclipse by his calculations, and it was not visible over Jerusalem. Case closed. But then in 1981, a British scientist who learned of the improvements in astronomical accuracy due largely to the study's change in Earth's rate of rotation around the sun over 2,000 years, known as delta T, that it might be interesting to revisit those calculations for the eclipse, the lunar eclipse in AD 33. And believe me, for those who were at Dr. Jackson's talk earlier this morning with all the calculations, these delta T calculations look like those calculations, and I'm going to follow Dr. Jackson's lead and go delta T, blah, 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 click. This is the original publication in Nature. Okay, so I'm sorry I was talking over the wrong slide. All right, next one. Oh, wait, no, did I do it right? No, yep, no, I didn't. Okay, next one, here we go. All right, Colin Humphreys, who was teaching at Oxford at the time, asked Oxford astrophysicist Waddington to determine whether the lunar eclipse would have been visible over Jerusalem. So, with a bit of irony, their findings was published in the same publication 111 years later. And the results were, and I have the information if anybody wants to look it up, but the results were, there was a full moon, blood red, coming up over the horizon, completely visible to Jerusalem. Because with NASA's help, and to change the delta T calculations for the change in our rotation around the sun over the 2,000 years, we now have an accurate depiction. Third criteria, What blocked out the sun? We can't have a solar eclipse. We now have a lunar eclipse over Jerusalem. So we got to look at environmental and geological elements to see what's going on with the sun. Now, from the 6th hour, there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. Okay, so what blocked out the sun that afternoon? What made the skies dark? First, let's do a fast review on how they told time, okay, and the way it was calculated 2,000 years ago. Because if you block out the sun, you're not telling time. All right? We also know from historians that there was no other means of telling time in Jerusalem. There was no sand clock, there was no water clock, and if they had a sundial, if the sun's blocked out, it's useless. So, telling time 2,000 years ago was 9 a.m. was told to be the 3rd hour of the day. Noon was the 6th hour of the day, and that's what we have in Matthew, 6th hour. 3 p.m. was the 9th hour. Okay, again, matching Matthew. 6 p.m. was the 12th hour, and then came lighting up time. Lighting up time meant at dusk, it was getting hard to see, and the oil lamps were lit. And Jerusalem would come alive with everybody lighting their oil lamps. Now, sundown for the Jewish people started the next day. That is why Thursday evening for Jesus was already Passover, and he celebrated the Last Supper because it was Friday for them. All right? The Romans started their next day at midnight like we do today. All right. Now, another part of this is from Matthew. We have the earth shaking and the rocks were split. So there's an earthquake. What evidence? What can we have to contribute to this? All right, so we have to take a look, and the contributing factor of this for an earthquake may contribute to the sun being blocked out. All right, so here we go. Due to the current warming periods, and every unpretentious scientist will say we are 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer today than we were in the 1880s, before the industrial age. Okay? So now, because of this slight warming going on, we have access to extra area in the Dead Sea that has become exposed. So it's like a time capsule being made available for us to study. And today's core samples from the Dead Sea also show that this is not the first time the Dead Sea has receded. It has receded many times over thousands of years. Now we have in Getty Spa, okay? This is the area that was tested, and let me see if I could get this working. All right, and this is a core sample, all right? And the sediment bed and structure was deformed by the shaking of the earthquake. And you could see that here. Here's normal soil on top of each other at the bottom. That's an earthquake. All right? The shaking of the soil actually is being recorded. And the term used for it came about by Adolf Schellacker in 1969. He calls it a seismite. So that's the name for the areas in core soil samples that show earthquake. All right. Now, core samples from the Dead Sea provide a unique record of past earthquakes due to the undisturbed layers of the sediment and the ability for us to date them accurately. The date on the first century earthquake in the Dead Sea are being published almost every few years. The International Geology Review is one of the publications. Okay. Some geologists have suggested that darkness described in the Gospels during the crucifixion could have been caused by a dust storm. Earthquakes can play a secondary role to that dust storm. Rock slides, buildings collapsing, and this satellite image over here is showing the dust storm blowing off the coast of Africa. Things become pretty powerful pretty fast if the conditions are right. So, a high altitude dust storm would block out the sun. This data is backed up by a recent event in Mexico. All right. In 2025, they had an earthquake. A massive dust storm swept across many municipalities in Mexico. The storm was attributed to a combination of factors, key factors to make everything go the way we're looking at for explanations. It included dry winters, dry spring, warmer than normal temperatures. That creates dry soil, and that makes it much easier for dust to be generated. Some geologists now have shown us the dust storm, that skinny layer right across the top of the earthquake is the dust storm. This is in the samples from the Dead Sea. In that layer of dust, they also found pollen. And the pollen is from flowers that pollinate in the springtime, thus contributing to the belief of the date in April. And I believe that also supports finding pollen on the Shroud of Turin. Because if we're finding this pollen here in the Dead Sea, then, and there was a dust storm, that means it was blowing all over the place. Okay. The analysis of dust layer on the disturbed Dead Sea soil samples from 33 AD are revealing valuable information such as the soil was disrupted by an earthquake, and because we have high winds and desert soil, we could have a dust storm. Local soil erosion due to human activities like agriculture and construction will also contribute. We also found the dust composition, soluble salts, carbonates, quartz, all right, and then pollen and fungal spores. All right, keep in mind warmer temperatures. Hot temperatures and dry soil allows dust storms to come about without notice. So, what's contributing to dry soil? Hot temperatures. How hot was it? No, I don't mean that as a, okay. It was just, but how hot was it in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago? Dust layer analysis continued. The samples matched the soil around the Dead Sea and Jerusalem by showing the components of the Dead Sea's hypersaline lake in the desert environment. Jerusalem's only 25 miles away from the Dead Sea. Right? The dating methods and now we could use radiocarbon dating. So dating methods and the conditions could determine the age of the dust layer. But geologists will say we don't need it. By taking the core samples, they are going back in time and they actually have the time period for each layer of the soil. But that would be another experiment that could be done to add credibility. Now the key thing in this dust layer is the fungal spores. They're telling a detailed story. All right? That's the plant's defense mechanism. A fungal spore is their defense mechanism, and it's a form of hibernation. So to survive hot and dry periods without water, immense heat, you get fungal spores. So finding that in the dust layer was key. Fourth criteria. As of now, with astronomical information, Dead Sea samples, geological data, and biblical writings, we have a strong suggestion that a significant earthquake and dust storm occurred during the Crucifixion. But what data points to the extreme temperatures? This is a model of Jerusalem from 2,000 years ago. And again, unpretentious scientists will agree we're averaging temperatures about 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than the pre-industrial age of the 1880s. To know the ground temperature in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, we have to go to the most comprehensive study ever done in 1998. Mount Kenya. This was the first quantitative assessment of a past warming period. Scientists performed an isotopic analysis of the sediment from Hasberg Tarn, a lake on the slope of Mount Kenya, 4,350 meters up. That's it at the bottom. That's the peak. And here's the peak again, but that's the lake at the bottom. They took core samples, and the study found that there was a rapid and significant warming of the lake waters by 4 degrees Celsius. The warming period lasted between 350 BC to 450 AD. These results match additional studies showing the warming of the Swedish part of Lapland, the southern Yukon Territory, and Alaska. All right?
Could you say those dates one more time?
Where the studies were done?
No, the date, the 350 BC?
350 BC to 450 AD. Okay? You know, the media did not cover this study. All right, Professor Shimesh, who head up the Environmental Science and Energy Research Department of the Weizmann Institute of Science, said this about the study's results. Our findings show that the climate can warm up suddenly without any connection to human activity. Okay, and the information is at the bottom for those who want to look and see the actual published reports and peer review articles. All right, this speaks volumes because nobody was driving SUVs back then. And I'm just going to pause for a second and say, as an environmental scientist and energy consultant, I was the energy advisor to the Earth Day Committee in 1990 on their 20th anniversary for New York City. And I was interviewed all the time by the media since then. And I was a good filler for the slow periods in the news. That's all it was worth to them. Then Al Gore's movie came out, Inconvenient Truth, and they saw and realized, wow, we can make a lot of money scaring the crap out of everybody. And they called me down and said, oh, we want to do you on an interview. We want you to talk about this prediction and that prediction. They wanted me to lie through the process of omission and make predictions so they could sell more commercials, more advertisements, and make more specials. Stay tuned next year when we continue. And they all end the same, you know, we're doomed or we may never know. Well, the Shroud story always is we may never know. Okay, the environmental story became we're doomed. And they started scaring kids. And me and my colleagues who are unpretentious scientists and we're not looking for 15 minutes of fame, when you evaluate all the facts, you see the truth. And yes, we have a warming trend, nothing compared to 2,000 years ago, and we have to be smart about it. We have to take steps, and we are, and we have been since the 1960s. And when someone says we're not doing anything, that's a personal insult to me. We've been doing a lot since before I even got on board. Okay, the skies around this planet are nowhere near what they could have been if we never did a single thing starting in the 1960s. in the 1960s. So I don't appreciate when greed steps in and starts destroying everything. Thank you. So now, today, in Norway, because of our current changing climates, okay, I don't say we have climate change, that means the whole planet. We have changing climates around the world, good, bad, indifferent, it's all happening. So because of that, we have the withdrawal of ice in Norway, and we have found human artifacts that have been released from their frozen contamination. Frozen containment. See, this is why I wanted to read this 2 more times, and you wouldn't let me. Arrowheads, tunics, tools, sandals, and in 2022, a 1700, oh, wrong button, a 1700 arrowhead was found in the Black Circle by archaeologists. They dated these items, and they all go back to match the warming period between 2,000 and 1,500 years ago. All right. Additionally, history speaks of the Roman Empire expanding all the way up to Scotland, northern Scotland. Okay? Sadly, these studies and others with the same results receive very little media attention, if any at all. And it goes against their narrative of making money. So anyway, the bottom line is that we have these facts that add to the evidence and contribute to this complete picture. Additional evidence shows humankind inhabited Greenland's coast in intervals from 2500 to 800 BC. The warmer period from about 200 BC until 450 AD also supported humans. However, after 300 to 450 AD, temperatures were too cold to inhabit Greenland, and we have evidence showing an uninhabited period for about 800 years until the Vikings arrived in 982. Also, the Romans retreated from Scotland. They started heading south again. You know, why? Because the Romans told the centurion, you know, I didn't sign up for this. I got beach sandals. I'm wearing a skirt. I'm freezing my giblets off. I'm going home. Rome never sounded so good. It's common sense. So, knowing the date of April 3rd, 33 AD helps to ascertain the weather conditions for back then. All right. In 2010, early April, 6 a.m. in the morning, Jerusalem had the high temperature of 93 degrees Fahrenheit. This converts to 33.9 degrees Celsius. Taking the 4 degrees Celsius temperature increase from Lake Hasberg-Tarn on Mount Kenya and adding it to the 2010 high temperature, we get 33.9 degrees Celsius. 37.9 degrees Celsius, thank you, or 100.2 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. However, this increase we add is from results 4,350 meters up on Mount Kenya. We have to make and configure an increase in this temperature since the crucifixion occurred closer to sea level in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is about 700 meters above sea level, or 2,400 feet. So, using information from NASA, the sun at its apex in Jerusalem, April 3rd, 33 AD, was around 11:40 a.m. in the morning. So let's make some estimates. I'm not saying Jesus died on the hottest day, but the hottest day in Jerusalem back then, 2,000 years ago, when the sun was at its apex in early April, could easily have reached 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Right. Currently, the average temperatures in Jerusalem around noon in early April range from 63 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So the overall approximate range over the past 20 years was between 45 and 93 degrees. And this data comes from over Jerusalem in April by time and date and weather spark. So I'm not just making up these numbers. Now, this research data gives evidence for each man wearing a sudarium, aka sweat cloth. I'm sorry, but if it's 105 degrees out, 5-minute warning, okay. John was the only apostle at the cross. I don't know if Nicodemus and Joseph wore a sudarium. They were well dressed, all right? But maybe that sudarium belonged to John, and he covered Jesus' face out of respect while waiting for permission from Pontius Pilate to take his body down after he died. So we can surmise, as they waited for Pilate's permission, that sudarium around someone's neck was used to cover Jesus' face. Yes, I took it. Yes, I'm guilty. I'm sorry. I tried to cut off the top of his head so I wouldn't interfere with copyrights, but so the climate in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago could have easily hosted a minimum conservative high temperature of 2 degrees Celsius higher. So that's about 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you look at the high temperature of 93 degrees over the past 20 years, 2,000 years ago, it's going to be a lot hotter. Basically, the sweat cloth became more than just wiping sweat, because if the soil was dry, the temperatures were high, and there were potential dust storms, it would be nice to have that to pull up over your face to protect your mouth, your eyes, and your nose real quick if some dust started to blow around. Okay, coming to the conclusion. In addition, okay, this is just adding to a hypothesis to look at what caused Jesus to die so soon. All right, many people believe Jesus died of shock by bleeding out. That's because they were assuming it was a cold April morning. If it was cold, Jesus would have bled out and could have gone into shock. But medical science tells us that blood clots when it is hot. So what's another possible cause of early death? All right, let's go to the Gospels. All right, and medical science goes along with this. We have reported information that Jesus spoke from the cross 7 times. That's not a man in shock. He knows what's going on, and he's speaking from the cross. All right. It was reported that Jesus cried out and gave out his spirit, Mark chapter 15, 37. Today's medical science knows that this is what happens when someone's aorta ruptures. You cry out in pain and die. Carry a crossbeam that weighs 75 to 125 pounds with your hands tied to it. Fall straight down to the pavement 3 times or more. Without any means of bracing yourself, you're hitting your chest. You're breaking your nose, or unless somebody punched his nose and broke it, and that's cartilage. It's not bone. No bones were broken. Okay? Hit your chest 3 times with that beam across your shoulders. From the wounds on the Shroud of Turin, forensic scientists saw the depth of those wounds and calculated the beam weighing 75 to 125 pounds. His aorta could have started to tear, only to rupture completely on the cross a few hours later, thus dying so soon. I can't prove it, but it's something to consider and another hypothesis to look into. All right? So, having this data with the very high ground temperatures from 2,000 years ago, it contributes to dust storms, the wearing of sudariums, a possible cause of Jesus dying early on the cross. So if the study of these temperatures can be included in all the research for the shroud, I would greatly welcome any collaborating work, from any key researcher to solidify these temperatures 2,000 years ago and add them to the equation on the Shroud of Turin and the day Jesus was crucified. Thank you.
Any questions?
Fabulous.
Thank you,
Thank
that
you.
was great.
I have a question. So out of the criteria that you listed, the only thing that separates that it takes 30 AD out, blood red moon, is that the only one, or maybe?
No earthquake and no dust storm.
Oh, the earthquake was that narrow to 33?
Yeah, they can't tell us the exact time and date the earthquake occurred.
Yeah. It was after 30?
Right, so, they have some, but it didn't happen in April in 33. Because of the dust storm, we have the pollen, and we have the evidence to say this is pollen from plants that pollinate in April, and gives us that time frame. We don't have that for 30 AD. Yes?
I think everybody knows by now I'm broadcasting live on social media. I know you know that, Bill. With permission of the conference, I just thought it would be useful for you to know, Bill. The viewers can tap the screen if they like what they're seeing. You're currently at 32,500. And by the way, they think you're very funny.
Thank you. Yes?
On your temperatures, do you have the uncertainty bounds on that? I know you gave them.
Yes, yeah, that's why I will welcome any additional work with researchers to solidify those numbers better, because it hasn't been done before. And also making that adjustment for the altitude difference is critical. So I need input from other scientists to know if we're in the ballpark or if we should make some adjustments and so forth. Because I would like this to contribute to the overall evidence showing that the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium is authentic. Yes, Father.
So I concord that I think you're very funny. I thought it was very entertaining. Can I ask a tough question? So help me understand this, because I know when we come to the formation of the image, we often use this kind of criteria, right? That, well, like Sherlock Holmes kind of logic. Like once we've eliminated all that's impossible, whatever remains is most certainly true. And so many of us would be content to say the image on the shroud is likely caused supernaturally and not naturally. And I know you're familiar with that kind of logic, but it would seem here, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking for naturalistic causes for the darkness.
Right.
And we're, I think, excluding a supernatural cause for that, which seems to be at least, maybe not a consensus, but at least a common view that's out there, that the darkness that we read about in the gospel is a miraculous or supernatural cause.
I can't rule that out because there are reports of that darkness being seen in China,
Okay.
in that same time frame. But I could say this, as an unpretentious scientist, I do not believe in coincidences. And I'm sorry, this is way too many coincidences to say, let's write this stuff off as natural causes, and this just does not happen like this. A gentleman at the dinner table with Dr. Jackson, who's sitting right here in the front row, point out, with a deck of cards, you throw them in the air, okay, and let's just wait for them to fall back into order again, the way they were originally in the deck. It's never going to happen. And all these coincidences, all right, for them to happen on this day, this time period, is a miracle.
Sorry.
Is that good? Is that good?
Yeah,
I always feel he's grading me.
Yeah, no. I think it's certainly viable. I think the hard part is what's tolerable is something different than something demonstrated. I think that we're on the same page on that.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
Well, there may be one more item adding to the finding of the year, because I believe from my reading of the Jewish publications, that was the year of High Shabbat, meaning right after Friday was Passover. Not every Passover occurs
Correct.
right after Friday.
Right.
So using that, maybe you could find a year.
Yeah, no, it is part of, from what I read and saw, yes, you're correct, yeah. Yes. Mark?
The rabbis have a saying, coincidence is not a kosher word. And
Okay.
it's a remarkable piece of work you've done here. And as you were talking, it kind of occurred to me, just like a modern digital photograph has metadata in it, when it was taken, where it was taken, all that kind of stuff. You've walked through metadata that's been embedded in the earth, from the tops of the mountains to regression analysis of where the moon is on a certain day, and you put all those pieces of data together to come to a remarkable conclusion. It is possible that you're the first person to ever do this. It's also possible that you were meant to do this. All that stuff was put in place thousands of years ago and just quietly sat for you to come along and dig through the data on Earth to put that story together.
And the Dead Sea drying up, so.
And the Dead Sea's drying up, yeah. Again, not a coincidence.
Thank you, but now, Paul, if that's true, it's definitely a miracle.
That's A-level work.
Yes.
I found this to be so provocative. I have so many questions and so many things. So I think the hallmark of a great talk is always just questions after questions. But one simple question, I don't know if you have addressed this or if anybody has or will. As Mark said, that what you're pulling out of the earth is, it's a print of what happened that day, that dust storm. And you said there's pollen in there. Has anybody looked at the pollen and compared it to anything that we're seeing on any of the objects, like the Shroud or the Sudarium? Because
See if it's the same pollen. Well, I know the pollen on the Shroud has been degraded. The pollen from the Dead Sea has been encapsulated.
Right.
So it's in far better condition than the pollen on the Shroud. But I do not know if anybody.
that sounds like a great opportunity for a study.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of countries doing studies around the Dead Sea, and we do need, definitely do need a lot more. Yes, sir?
Just really quick. Outside the Dead Sea, through those layers, the earthquake layer and the dust layer.
Right. In Getty
Data
Spa.
on expanding out to X miles, 200 miles, 1,000 miles, whatever. Is there any more data?
Yeah, well,
relating to
in Getty Spa, where they took the core samples, is an area that is beyond and outside, I believe maybe about, I gotta find out, but about 3 miles from the main Dead Sea, in Getty Spa,
It's
so.
not huge, okay, thank you.
Yeah, they are taking samples from all around.
Alaska, you said, I'm sorry.
That's gonna have to cut it off,
Bill,
guys.
one of my viewers said they wish they could shake your hand, and I said I
Okay.
would do it as a.
All right,
36,000.
36,000, okay. I like 33 better. But for any additional questions, I'll meet you outside and.
Dumpster.
And, I gotta leave this. Yeah, and maybe I'll set up my book, so.
All right, let's give a final hand to.